Hello there. In this video, we're going to be talking a lot more than about breaks and bruises and strains and sprains and tears and tears. We're going to be talking about how to protect your child's body and mind for the future of sports, how to prevent injuries in youth sports. That's the topic of today's video, so stay tuned for that. As we begin talking about this very important subject, of course, we want to be talking about what everybody thinks of when they think about preventing injuries, and that's strength and flexibility. We want to be talking about how your mindset will play into that. And right along with that is how anxiety will influence injuries. Let's hear from what experts say, some people like Tom Brady and Kelly Starrett and others from the field. And of course, we want to be talking about routine. So all that is what we'll be covering next. The modern day athlete understands the importance of trying to get bigger, stronger, faster. Now, it's come quite a way since I was in high school. I was in high school, there was very little organized training. Football players began to lift weights early on, began to go into other sports, but it was all about bulking up, especially high school, even at the college level. They didn't fully appreciate the idea of different movement practices within unique sports setting, right? So what you need to do to develop strength, functional strength in football is not necessarily the same as it is in basketball or soccer or wrestling or baseball or tennis or all the variety of sports, right? The movements are all different. So they begin to understand and appreciate that this idea of flexibility and fluidity in your movement and power and speed and explosiveness and all these other things were different and need to be trained differently. You can look at some of the results of this knowledge as well. Like back in the 1980s, even in the 90s, if you were an MLB pitcher, one of the more serious injuries that was fairly frequent back in those days was a torn rotator cuff, right? It's one of these patterns of muscles in the shoulder. You rarely hear of that particular injury in the MLB anymore because they begin to understand how to strengthen those muscles. The injury now is the elbow ligament, right? Damaged to the elbow, which is a totally different way to what can we do to strengthen that? Muscles we understand, but ligaments and tendons are a different beast, right? So as we begin to understand movement and fluidity, things on how you go about training those change. An overlooked aspect of training that you've been listening to me for a number of videos, is this idea of mindset, right? So when you are training your body, what do you believe about what your body's capable of? What you believe about the idea of bulking up? What you believe about preventing injuries? What you believe about all that has a dramatic impact on how your body reacts to your training, right? So we want to make sure that there are no beliefs hidden, buried in your unconscious mind that limit what you are capable of in terms of speed and strength, endurance, any athletic kind of aspect of training. For example, right, I was a thin guy, skinny guy, had this idea also that I would never be that strong. Now, there's a subtle difference between saying that I will never be as strong as somebody else and saying I will never be very strong. Very strong is too general. What does that mean? But what it's doing is putting a cap on my ability to build strength. And when I work out, it puts that idea in my mind that I can't do any more weight or I can't do any more because I'm not that strong. We want to remove those kind of beliefs, and there are ways for doing that or override the belief. Anything that has that potential to cap what you are physically capable of. NCAA reported in a study that athletes who experience anxiety are 2.5 times more likely to get injured. Now, if we stop to think about that, even stop to think about that logically, it begin to make sense. Because when you are anxious, you begin to tense up very subtly within your body, right? There's a natural response to anxiety. It's a natural response to fear, the emotion that may be pushing some of the anxiety, right? Anxiety, again, is a future emotion. In other words, you are feeling anxiety about something that is going to happen in the future, right? That's what anxiety is. If you're thinking about something that had happened in the past, it's a different emotion, all right? But either way, when you are holding on to those emotions, which is also part of mindset, particularly anxiety, you will begin to tense up. So it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that injuries will happen more often when people are feeling anxious. So, what are some of the experts talking about? Well, people like Tom Brady, and I use him as an expert not because of his background in you know, physiology or strength and conditioning or anything like that. His coach, his personal trainer, Alex Guerrero, had his own ideas. But we use Tom Brady as expert because he played a very violent sport, very physically demanding sport, really without injury. The most significant injury happened very early in his career. And he played it to like 45 years old at a very high level. So let's model. What's he doing? Oh, and his methodology is about low impact. It's not really about building uh, big muscles. It was about flexibility and pliability and strength, but functional strength. Kelly Starrett is like another expert he's designed a whole lot of these kind of now stretching routines to get mobility that are become standardized. He's the one who kind of first developed these. And he is about mobility as well. Eric Cressy is another strength and conditioning guy who worked a lot with professional baseball players. And again, it's about functional strength, speed, flexibility, mobility. You're putting all these things together, and it's looking at how you need to move your body for your sport, and then how to train those muscles that do that well, and what is needed in that. Is it explosiveness, right? Quickness. How do we develop those things functionally? And that's what these guys are really about, and how to develop a strength and conditioning program for your sport for you. So, one thing as an athlete that you want to do is get into routines. Now, this is going to be something, particularly when you're younger, right? And you haven't even reached puberty yet. You want to be thinking much more about naturally building athleticism and movement practices, right? The idea of trying to really build uh, bulk and all that before you've even hit puberty is something we throw out with extreme caution. This is also why a lot of coaches are also talking about doing multiple sports, right? So the routine before puberty should be different than after puberty, right? And once you hit puberty, you still want to be thinking about doing multiple sports because you work your body differently in these different sports. So the idea of how you're going to go about training in season for multiple sports and then out of season, whatever that might be, and however long that might be, then that's something you should be having a conversation with doctor, coaches, and strength and conditioning coaches, right? But it is becoming more and more evident that doing multiple sports at an early age, especially, is highly beneficial, much more than specializing in a sport beginning at a very early age. That's really has a lot to do with this idea of preventing injuries, because you get, when you're doing one sport over and over and over, overuse injuries are the result. That wraps up another video. I encourage you, as always, please consider subscribing to our channel. And I would also encourage you to register for one of our free webinars. In particular, you might be interested in Empower and Excel. That webinar kind of cover some of the topics that we did today a little more in depth. The link to that will be in the description, so register for that today, and then come back and visit us in another video.